Welcome back to the Cosmic Awakening podcast. I am Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. I have a wealth of insights and stories to share from decades of lived experiences spanning spiritual, interdimensional, and extraterrestrial contacts. Today's episode: The World of E.T. Contacts, Beyond C5. Chapter 8.1. The Ego as a Biological Automated Program. The frequency of contact. Why the ego is the ultimate barrier to extraterrestrial connection. For anyone beginning to explore the intersection of extraterrestrial contact and human consciousness, a fundamental question often arises. What does the ego have to do with seeing a UFO or communicating with higher dimensional beings? When followers ask, "How can I see a UAP?" or "How can I channel or communicate with star beings?" they are usually looking for a technical secret, a specific meditation posture, a visual frequency, or a ritual phrase. Yet, the answer lies far deeper than mere mechanics. Most people remain completely unaware of the true nature of their own ego. The modern middle conscious mind struggles to bridge the gap to higher planes of existence simply because its biological ego program is fundamentally incompatible with the frequency of higher intelligence. 1. The ego as a biological firewall against the unknown. To understand why contact eludes the average modern human, we must look back at the ego as a biological automated program. Built from the survival hardware of the reptilian brain and limbic system, the ego's primary directive is threat detection, pattern recognition, and control. When a modern individual contemplates an extraterrestrial being, their conscious mind might feel fascinated, welcoming, and intellectually curious. However, beneath that surface layer, the biological ego program perceives the unknown as an existential threat. To an unmastered ego, a higher dimensional intelligence represents a total loss of control and unquantifiable variable, and a disruption of the safe, predictable reality it has constructed. As a result, the nervous system triggers microdoses of fear, hesitation, and subconscious resistance. This biological firewall acts as a dense energetic shield, keeping the individual locked firmly within 3.5 density reality. Higher dimensional beings operate on vast unified fields of resonance. They do not crash into a closed, fear-driven biological circuit. The barrier to contact is rarely external. It is the rigid internal architecture of our own egoic programming. 2. The Andean indigenous mind, a clean circuit for contact. In contrast to the hyperstimulated, hyperanalyzed modern mind, indigenous traditions worldwide, particularly high in the Andes Mountains among ancient lineage keepers, have maintained a very different relationship with the cosmos. Oral histories and lived experiences in the Sacred Valley frequently speak of direct, harmonious contact with star beings. Why are indigenous populations historically more open to these phenomena? It is not because they possess superior technology, but because their consciousness and ego structures are fundamentally different. Absence of complex mental noise. Modern urban life floods the nervous system with constant stress, algorithmic outrage, economic anxiety, and social judgment. This active automated intelligence manufactures a thick cloud of mental static. Andean indigenous lifeways, rooted closely to the rhythms of nature, remain relatively pure and innocent. Open hearts and low automated judgment. Because their daily survival does not depend on hypervigilant ego defense mechanisms, their minds hold far less automated judgment toward the unknown, the mystical, or the divine. Without a rigid framework of skepticism or fear guarding the gate, their biological ego program does not panic when faced with anomalous phenomena. Their consciousness acts as an open, unclouded mirror, making them naturally resonant with the peaceful, multidimensional frequencies of star beings. 3. Resonance over technique, rewiring the human vehicle for contact. The stark contrast between the modern urban ego and the pure Andean consciousness reveals an essential truth about extraterrestrial contact. ET beings naturally favor resonance over intellect. Advanced civilizations operating from the fifth density and beyond do not interface with human egos, intellectual dogmas, or complex conceptual frameworks. They read energy, purity of intent, and emotional density. When the human ego is stripped of its frantic need for control, when the automated judgment loops are quieted through deep inner work, and when the physical vehicle is cleared of chronic stress, the vibrational frequency of the individual naturally elevates. To bridge the gap between our current reality and the vast community of the cosmos, we must deprogram the biological automated ego. We must step out of the frantic, fearful mental prison of modern civilization and cultivate the quiet, open-hearted clarity of the ancients. When the internal static clears and the ego's defense systems stand down, contact is no longer an impossible mystery. It becomes a natural, harmonious homecoming. The human ego, frequently mistaken for the core of who we are, is actually something far more mechanical. An intricate, beautifully complex biological automated program woven directly into the neural fabric of our being across the myriad stages of human development. This persona does not emerge from the infinite depths of spiritual consciousness. Rather, it is painstakingly constructed through the unconscious memorization of life experiences, conditioned behaviors, and the relentless, subtle threads of social and cultural programming that intertwine from infancy onward. Examining this phenomenon through the lens of advanced neurobiology and consciousness studies illuminates precisely how our rigid identities are formed, relentlessly maintained, and ultimately primed for transformation. 1. The neurobiology of the mask, how the persona is compiled. From the moment a human organism enters the world, its brain begins functioning as an organic supercomputer, recording environmental inputs, emotional feedbacks, and survival strategies. The memorization matrix, the egoic identity, is essentially a compilation of stored scripts. When faced with environmental stimuli, the brain retrieves established neural pathways, etched deeply by repetition, trauma, or social reward, to generate an automatic behavioral response. By organic coding. Just as artificial intelligence relies on lines of code to simulate personality and decision-making, human automatic intelligence operates via biological coding. The physical body, driven by the basal ganglia and the survival-oriented limbic system, memorizes how to react, defend, project, and conform. Over time, this accumulated library of automated reflexes hardens into what we call the persona. 2. The trap of identification, mistaking the program for the player. The fundamental delusion of human existence occurs when individual, limitless consciousness looks at this biological automated program and whispers, "That is me," running on autopilot. Because the egoic program is designed to conserve metabolic and cognitive energy, it prefers to run entirely in the background. It handles daily survival, social posturing, and emotional defense mechanisms without requiring conscious oversight. Most human beings live their entire lives completely identified with this background software, reacting reflexively to triggers just as a programmed machine responds to inputs. The illusion of free will : as long as the ego remains unexamined, what feels like free choice is often nothing more than the automated program executing its preloaded instructions, defending the egoic boundary, seeking validation, or fleeing from perceived threats. 3. Decompiling the code, the gateway to liberation. Recognizing that the ego is a biological automated program, rather than an immutable soul, is profoundly liberating. Stepping out of the loop. When we bring conscious awareness to the mechanics of the persona, we begin to see the code running in real time. We notice the exact triggers that spark anger, the mental scripts that justify fear, and the behavioral patterns that enforce separation. Awakening the true self. This objective realization breaks the spell of identification. By stepping out of the automated program and into the unconditioned observer state, the true seat of consciousness, we begin the vital work of deprogramming the ego, clearing the path for higher integration, spiritual maturity, and true sovereign freedom. The formation of the ego, neural development, and memory. The construction of the human ego is not an abstract spiritual mystery. It is an active, highly intricate neurological engineering project. In the early years of life, the human brain blossoms through a breathtaking explosion of rapid growth and neural connectivity, forging pathways specifically dedicated to social navigation, emotional regulation, and cognitive processing. This ego formation is an orchestrated dance among several key brain regions, principally the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Together, these anatomical structures weave the complex biological automated program we experience as our personal identity. 1. The prefrontal cortex, the architect of the persona. Sitting at the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, PFC, serves as the master conductor of higher cognitive functions, orchestrating complex decision-making, social interactions, and self-awareness. Shaping the self-concept, the PFC mediates our daily responses to the external world, filtering raw sensory data through social norms, learned rules, and cultural expectations. The seat of the social mask, within the intricate networks of the prefrontal cortex, lies the scaffolding of our self-concept. Here, sensory inputs and personal experiences coalesce into a cohesive, manageable identity, a functional persona designed to secure belonging, status, and safety within the human tribe. 2. The amygdala, the guardian and memorizer of emotional charge. Deep within the temporal lobes lies the amygdala, the fierce guardian of our emotional landscape and survival hardware. Encoding emotional signatures. The amygdala is vital for detecting threats, processing intense feelings like fear, anger, or joy, and stamping those experiences with powerful emotional valence. Etching the ego's boundaries, emotional memories are deeply etched into long-term storage via the amygdala. These charged memories profoundly shape our perceptions of self versus other, teaching the nervous system what to fight, what to flee from, and what to cling to for psychological protection. 3. The hippocampus, the master storyteller and archivist. Working in tandem with the emotional center is the hippocampus, the brain's primary reservoir for explicit, declarative memories, rich with facts, dates, and historical life events. Weaving the life narrative, the hippocampus allows us to construct a continuous personal history, turning disjointed moments into a neat chronological story. This is who I was, this is what happened to me, and therefore this is who I am today. The fluidity of the archive. Crucially, the hippocampus continually updates our ego-based scripts according to new experiences, integrating fresh insights with existing knowledge. This ongoing updating process reveals the underlying fluidity of identity, proving that the ego is not a static rock, but a continuously rewritten software program running on biological hardware. Unconscious memorization, conditioning, and the plasticity of the ego. As we traverse the myriad stages of growth, the human body and mind become vast, living vessels of information. We are constantly absorbing lessons, cues, and micro-traumas from our immediate environment, social interactions, and formative relationships. These experiences are rarely processed entirely in the clear light of conscious awareness. Instead, they are quietly encoded in the deep subterranean vaults of the unconscious mind. Over time, these encoded impressions manifest as deeply ingrained automatic responses, weaving themselves inextricably into the very fabric of our egoic structure. 1. Classical and operant conditioning, the behavioral software. In the realm of behavioral psychology, conditioning acts as a primary programming language that shapes human personality and cements the boundaries of the ego. Classical conditioning, associative imprinting. Through this mechanism, the nervous system links neutral environmental stimuli with powerful emotional responses. A tone of voice, a sudden look of disapproval, or a specific environment becomes permanently associated with fear, rejection, or safety. Long after the original event has passed, the ego continues to react automatically whenever a similar stimulus appears in the present. Operant conditioning, reinforcement, and modulation. This process dances continuously between reward and punishment, reinforcement and behavioral modification. Behaviors that brought praise, affection, or survival security in childhood are aggressively reinforced, while expressions of vulnerability or independence that drew criticism are locked away in the shadow. Together, classical and operant conditioning cultivate rigid habits and knee-jerk defense mechanisms, forming the foundational bedrock upon which the ego operates. 2. Neuroplasticity, the double-edged sword of the brain's adaptability. Embedded within this conditioning is the brain's most remarkable evolutionary feature, neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the organ's innate ability to physically reshape, prune, and strengthen its own neural architecture by forming new connections based on repeated usage. Carving the highways of the mind. When a thought, emotional reaction, or behavioral pattern is repeated over and over, neuroplasticity ensures that the corresponding neural pathway becomes a deeply grooved, energy-saving highway. This is why the ego's automated responses eventually feel completely effortless and absolute. The mechanism of evolution and liberation. Yet, neuroplasticity is also the ultimate key to spiritual and psychological freedom. Because the brain remains plastic throughout life, it is never permanently locked into its old programming. By bringing conscious awareness to our automatic loops, practicing mindfulness, and introducing new intentional mental states, we can actively redirect neuroplasticity, dismantling the ego's old, destructive pathways and cultivating new channels of clarity, sovereignty, and higher consciousness. The mechanisms of the ego: sensory input, perception, and memory. The biological automated program of the ego does not function in a vacuum. It is continuously fueled, updated, and reinforced by a relentless stream of data flowing through our sensory organs and memory vaults. To fully understand how the ego maintains its rigid grip on human consciousness, we must examine the precise neurobiological mechanisms through which sensory input is translated into personal identity, and how memory archives the narrative of the self. 1. Sensory input and perception, the raw materials of the persona. The very essence of the ego is forged from the outside in, heavily shaped by the continuous bombardment of sensory input. Our perceptions of the world, filtered, interpreted, and categorized by the brain, weave the primary tapestry of our identities, processed through a breathtaking symphony of neural pathways. Sensory processing and integration. Specialized regions of the brain, such as the occipital lobe for visual interpretation, the temporal lobe for auditory signals, and the parietal lobes for somatic feedback, harmonize instantly to decode environmental data. This intricate neurological ballet allows us to interpret experiences, assign meaning, and form memories. The seamless integration of sensory information fosters a coherent, stable understanding of self versus environment, drawing a hard boundary that defines the ego's skin-encapsulated world. Desensitization is structural evolution. Within the ongoing dance of ego development, desensitization emerges as a critical mechanism of adaptation. Through repeated, chronic exposure to specific environments, stressors, or sensory inputs, the nervous system reduces its emotional and physiological sensitivity. While desensitization can numb an individual to toxic conditions, conscious desensitization, such as calming the nervous system during meditation, carves out essential cognitive space, allowing the persona to evolve beyond its initial survival-based conditioning. 2. The dual architecture of memory, implicit and explicit archives. If sensory input provides the daily raw materials, memory serves as the structural bedrock upon which the ego is permanently constructed. Memory is divided into two distinct, powerful systems that contribute uniquely to the mosaic of self-identity. Implicit memory, the unconscious foundation. Operating entirely in the shadows of awareness, implicit memory influences behavior, posture, and emotional reactions without explicit recognition or conscious thought. Stored largely in the basal ganglia and cerebellum, these unconditioned and conditioned behavioral responses are crucial in shaping the automatic ego. They dictate our knee-jerk reactions, guide split-second decision-making, and enforce unspoken habits along neural pathways laid down years prior. Explicit memory, the conscious narrator. In direct contrast, explicit memory, governed heavily by the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, allows for the conscious recollection of facts, faces, dates, and life events. It empowers the mind to weave neat, continuous narratives about our lives. This is my past, this is my trauma, this is my triumph. By integrating past experiences into a cohesive self-concept, explicit memory fosters a localized sense of self-awareness, providing the structural glue that holds the egoic storyline together across time. Back to the subject of E.T. contact, why understanding your ego and your consciousness, which said middle conscious, subconscious, and higher consciousness, aka higher self, important to achieve your desire to in contact with higher realms of extraterrestrial consciousness or interdimensional consciousness, without influence of ego, filters, preconceived notion of many ideology, narrow religious beliefs, and it views. You may simply thinking you want to be in touch with UFO/UAP phenomena, or more in advance, in touch with higher intelligence, which may operates UFO/UAP. As I said, whose vehicles operates their consist technologies, developing a new version of the self. To transform the ego, we must embark on a journey that facilitates the desensitization of sensory inputs and the creation of new memorization patterns. This metamorphosis requires conscious effort and deep self-awareness, sensory acclimatization, and new pathways, creating new sensory experiences, embracing new activities, exploring unfamiliar environments, and engaging with diverse social interactions can expand our sensory horizons. This exposure fosters the emergence of new neural pathways, nurturing growth and transformation in how we perceive ourselves and our surroundings. Rewiring neural pathways. We can intentionally reshape our neural pathways through gentle mindfulness practices, cognitive behavioral techniques, and neuroplasticity exercises. By challenging old patterns and beliefs, we create space for fresh ways of thinking and being. This transformative process often involves recognizing and addressing unconscious programming that may hinder personal growth. The importance of memory and change. Memorization of new experiences. As we engage in novel activities and cultivate awareness, we simultaneously weave new memories into our being. This new memorization lays the groundwork for updated thinking pathways, enabling us to develop a more authentic version of ourselves. Conscious reflection. Engaging in reflective practices, journaling, meditation, or quiet contemplation can facilitate the processing of new experiences. By consciously analyzing these memories, we integrate them into our evolving identity, enhancing self-awareness and understanding. In this intricate dance of growth and transformation, the ego unfolds as a biological automated program, reflecting the beautiful complexity of our human experience. Recognizing the interplay of neural development, sensory input, and memory allows us to navigate our journeys with greater consciousness. This ongoing process of desensitization and new memorization opens pathways to a more authentic self, inviting us to embrace the fullness of our existence and the potential for continual evolution. The galactic perspective, how higher dimensional intelligences approach Earth. Imagine stepping out of the vast unified expanse of a fifth density or higher civilization and looking down at Earth. If you were a non-human, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional intelligence desiring peaceful, meaningful contact with the genuine intent to assist a developing species, how would you approach humanity? When viewed through the lens of galactic diplomacy, the strategy becomes immediately clear. You would not land in the center of a hyper-militarized, hyper-materialistic modern metropolis, where the population is trapped in chronic fight or flight stress. Instead, you would look for the rare, uncontaminated exceptions, and you would study the biological and psychological barriers that make contact with modern urban humanity so difficult. 1. The diplomatic dilemma, navigating the human ego's panic response. From a diplomatic standpoint, initiating open contact requires finding individuals who can remain calm, centered, and receptive when confronted with an intelligence that completely shatters their baseline reality. The trigger of the unknown, to an unmastered human ego running on biological automated programs. Anything that defies physical laws or conventional understanding triggers an immediate survival response. The amygdala fires, cortisol surges, and the mind panics, interpreting the unknown as an existential predator. Protecting the host, a genuinely benevolent extraterrestrial intelligence, cannot force open contact upon a panicked reactive nervous system. Doing so would fracture the human's fragile psychological structure, triggering mass hysteria, violent projection, or profound trauma. Therefore, higher dimensional beings must carefully vet unsteady human consciousness, searching specifically for individuals who have mastered their egoic defenses, quieted their automated judgment loops, and learned to observe reality without fear. 2. The search for purity. Why star beings gravitate toward indigenous wisdom. If you were mapping out a planetary rescue and elevation mission, you would naturally seek out populations whose daily lives are not contaminated by the spiritual and mental toxicities of modern industrial civilization. This explains why, throughout history, indigenous peoples such as Native Americans, Amazonian tribes, and Andean lineage keepers have maintained deep, unbroken oral traditions of interacting with star beings. Harmonizing with nature. Indigenous lifeways are fundamentally anchored in natural rhythms, respect for the land, and ecological harmony. Because their survival does not rely on the ruthless hyper-competition of modern capitalist materialism, their biological automated ego programs are far less rigid and defensive. Open hearts over complex intellect. These populations do not approach the cosmos through the lens of academic skepticism, algorithmic noise, or ego-driven dominance. Their consciousness is relatively innocent and open-hearted. When faced with mystical or non-human phenomena, their minds do not automatically default to fear or cynical dismissal. To an interstellar diplomat, an indigenous soul living in harmony with nature offers a clear, unpolluted mirror, making heart-to-heart, telepathic, and peaceful communication infinitely more natural. 3. The modern city mind, materialism, noise, and the barrier to contact. In stark contrast, the modern city mind presents a monumental challenge for higher-dimensional contact. Trapped in concrete jungles and saturated by 24/7 digital connectivity, the urban human is locked inside a heavy cage of materialism and artificial urgency. Drowning in mental static, modern city life forces the brain into a state of perpetual hyperstimulation. Economic pressures, social media validation loops, and constant anxiety over the future keep the nervous system flooded with stress hormones. The materialist blindfold. Furthermore, modern materialistic culture trains individuals to believe that only physical matter is real, systematically cutting them off from the subtle energetic dimensions where ET and interdimensional interactions actually occur. When an interstellar intelligence observes modern humanity, they see a civilization running frantic biological software, obsessed with power, distracted by trivialities, and terrified of its own shadow. Yet, this exact understanding is precisely why the mission of awakening, ego demolition, and inner mastery is so vital. By recognizing how our own automated programming and egoic defenses block our perception, we can consciously clear the static, step out of the materialist prison, and evolve into the peaceful, resonant ambassadors that the cosmos is waiting to meet. The Galactic Guardians: why advanced intelligences do not invade and how the ego keeps us apart. When examining the intricate relationship between extraterrestrial contact and the human ego, the biological automated program running relentlessly in our minds, a profound realization emerges. Extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and higher consciousness beings are immensely advanced. Not only have they mastered hypertechnology and deep spirituality, but their physical and energetic vehicles possess a volume and density of consciousness that vastly surpasses that of modern humanity. If their scientific and technological capabilities exceed our wildest comprehension, a fundamental question echoes through the history of ufology. If they wanted to conquer or colonize Earth, wouldn't it be a trivial, effortless task? Why have they not invaded us the same way human civilizations have ruthlessly invaded one another throughout history? The answer lies in the stark contrast between galactic consciousness and the primitive, territorial nature of the human ego. 1. The galactic perspective, witnessing the human experiment. Higher dimensional star races have been visiting this planet since the dawn of human civilization, quietly watching humanity grow, stumble, and evolve. They understand the exact nature of our evolutionary growing pains, and they know precisely what the greatest hurdle to our planetary evolution is: the unmastered human ego. Because they operate from the fifth density and beyond, these civilizations view existence through a unified, holistic lens. They understand quantum physics, non-local consciousness, and the interconnected web of all life. To an advanced, spacefaring civilization capable of folding spacetime and manipulating energy fields, the idea of launching a primitive, violent military invasion for resources or territory is entirely obsolete. Such brutal conquest is a behavioral trait unique to species trapped in biological survival loops. 2. The mirror of history: why humans invade and ETs do not. When human history is examined objectively, invasion and colonization are driven entirely by the automated mechanisms of the reptilian brain and the egoic survival program. Scarcity and fear. The human ego operates from a core delusion of separation and scarcity, the belief that there is never enough, that other groups are threats to our survival, and that power must be seized through dominance. The cycle of conquest. Throughout our recorded past, technologically superior human empires have routinely invaded, enslaved, and exploited less developed populations because their societal structures were governed by tribalism, fear, and territorial aggression. Extraterrestrials do not invade us because they have outgrown the ego. A civilization that has successfully integrated its consciousness, transcended fear, and mastered the universal laws of energy does not conquer, it assists. An aggressive colonizing species is, by definition, a species that has not yet evolved past its own internal biological programming. 3. Elevating humanity to the galactic ideal. If higher-dimensional beings desire to help Earth humans draw closer to their elevated ideal, how do they approach a species locked in ego-driven conflict? They cannot force peace upon a reactive, fear-driven population, nor can they impose an enlightened reality onto a civilization that uses its own technology for destruction. An open and forced diplomatic connection requires transforming the internal landscape of the human host. They are waiting for us to dismantle the very biological prison that keeps us isolated, our own automated ego. By studying human nature across millennia, these star beings understand that humanity's true liberation will not come from external rescue, but from internal mastery. When we quiet the relentless chatter of the automated program, step out of the frantic fight or flight loops, and elevate the volume of our consciousness, we finally bridge the gap. We stop mirroring the primitive conquerors of our past, and we open our hearts to the peaceful, expansive community of the cosmos waiting for us on the other side. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening, Part 1. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of real-life experiences, perfect for your daily plunge into consciousness exploration. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's exploration.